Good morning, good morning, good morning. This is Mr. Not Advice. Happy to be here with my two of the three stooges, two other stooges, Mr. Requenoir and Mr. Lotto von Bismarck, calling in from somewhere in Eastern Europe. Anyway, we're going to go through a deeper dive on the EOSE earnings call and earnings release today. Hopefully this is going to turn into something a little bit more consistent as we look at other companies on a monthly basis also. So if you're listening to this and you've got companies you'd like us to consider looking at, please feel free to DM those to me, or you can always email to me at theboss@mrnotadvice.com. As always, this is for education and entertainment purposes only. So why don't we go ahead and get right to it? Gentlemen, why don't we start with just perhaps your quick takeaways from the broader view of the earnings call. My quick takeaway, it was nice for a change to see. Sense was a change in tone in terms of laying out some more specifics. I thought that they did a better job, and and I've said this before, the bar is pretty low when it comes to earnings calls from them. But I was encouraged to hear comments about line one, about them utilizing moving line one, although at the same time I had a question about line three, why that announcement wasn't made. But I'd like to get your broader comments about it, and then we can go into more of a deeper dive in some of the details. And once again, I really appreciate the time and effort that both of you have put in. I know that I've gotten just a tremendous positive response, just with your guys giving our listeners just your opinions and your thought process, how you arrive at conclusions. So, let's start with you, Requenoir. What was your general takeaway from this call? And let's compare it to past calls.
Yeah, I thought it was a lot more businesslike, in tone and in substance. I thought that it was much more centered around execution instead of this constant, quote, when orders narrative that we've had for, the past two or three. I actually think that the orders story is sort of moving towards the background. Not that it's gone away, obviously, because for obvious reasons. But I thought that this time was much more focused on detail and how they were going to get from where they are to where they need to go for this thing really to take off. So that's just 50,000
Yeah,
foot view on the call.
awesome, awesome. Lotto, what about you? What was your takeaway? What was your impression post earnings call?
Well, yes, as Rekuna pointed out, it was way more professional than the calls before, and they were not digging around because lessons learned and so on. No, they had a clear vision. Okay, we're moving line one. We put everything in Torn Hill, and we upgrade line one as well. So this is like they have a route now. They have a plan, and they're not digging around for like, yeah, we learn lessons and that kind of stuff. So it seems to me they they had some tough conversations with their internal meetings, and these conversations are paying off.
Do you think that the result, and I echo what you're saying, because I'm used to hearing calls about the potential, right? The potential is great. The potential is great. And this was one of the first calls where it was focusing, as you said, on some of the details, the blocks that had to be put into place in order to achieve the potential that they have been, that I believe they can achieve, despite Pizza Boy being in charge as the CEO. But let's as an answer to that question, let's go into a little bit of a deeper dive. And were there any specific data points that stuck out to you, either one of you, either from a positive standpoint or a negative standpoint? uh, my takeaway, the one thing that I wanted to hear was commentary about line three, and I guess I'm thinking about it, well, are we pushing off line three because we can move line one and we can reconfigure line one? And I guess number one, that would be a question for both of you. But number two, is that from an operational standpoint, is that wise, a good use of capital and time, or are they trying to fix a broken horse?
Well, if I start answering, look, what they said that they're able to move line one, and from what my understanding, they are able to upgrade line one to the same capacity as line two. And in that regard, they said they are already at a 10% higher cycle time on line two, which is for me, I didn't expect it so early that they are going down with the cycle time, like while the product quality stays the same. So if they are able to put line one in the same facility as line two, and in the same regard upgrading it to the same capacity, well, that's for me a good use of capital, because it's way less capital intensive than to have a new line like a line three available.
Is
Uh,
line one, but can line one truly be, let's use the term upgraded, right? Uh,
yes, yes,
the time to
absolutely.
move it, I mean, are you concerned about the time to move it, the time to reinstall it, and then the time to change the configuration from multiple floors and to a straight line? Is this, how would I say this? Is line one, should I take anything from this to the extent that we're going to do line one because we're have an issue with line three? They don't have a capital issue. They could very well, announce line three. They have the capital to do it. Should it be read that way? Or, you've put lines in before. How difficult of a task this will this be? And should we expect delays?
Well, I can only speak from manufacturing in general. When you have a long-term capital investment in a production facility, it's completely normal that you have so-called refurbishments. When technology changes on the way, you refurbish the already existing production line to the newer technology upgrades, like whether it's robots or sensors or computer systems or whatever it is, or handling systems. This is in long-term capital investment manufacturing a normal operation. So
Okay.
I would see that as a positive thing, and not like, oh, we don't have the money for line three. I would just say they want to maximize the efficiency and, yes, the lessons learned. So because when they are able to upgrade line one to line two capacity and more with the tweaks and the upgrades and the lower cycle time they have already on line two, then they are for sure able to put line three in a shorter period of time.
Requinar, what would your comments be to that? Are you, from project management and project development, what was your takeaway? I was surprised, quite frankly, that they were going to reconfigure line one.
Well, let me work backwards. I'm going to work backwards from line three. So to announce line three with what they're about to do with line one probably would have been interpreted by people who have enough knowledge to be a potential disaster.
Hmm.
There was no need. There's no need to do that. But let me go even a step out further than that. So apparently, line three would not be off the table at this point because they only need to let the DOE know their intentions and have their submissions by the end of December, as I recall. Bert, who a lot of people who are listening to this are going to be familiar with, I'm sorry, his handle escapes me at the moment, but everybody will know who Bert is. He laid out in quite a lot of detail what those criteria are. And they probably have at least 80% of those done. Putting my developer's hat on again. I looked at the list from the standpoint of a developer, and none of them were difficult to do. In fact, they probably have that whole package basically ready to go. So line three, so that's the detailed answer for line three is not yet off the table. It's just not on the table currently. So now let's talk about the line one conversion. Yeah, I was surprised. I thought they would announce and install line three before even contemplating the movement of line one. And obviously they didn't do that. Now, I actually think that that is a very positive sign, and they hinted at that several times in the call. They made the statement that because of the results, in fact, here's the quote. We are accelerating the consolidations of operations into our modern Thornhill facility. And I underlined this because what it has begun to deliver.
Hmm.
So that's telling you that they're getting, and they're only doing tests on that line with a skeleton crew. And they said that in the call also. So they're getting such good results on line two at this early stage that they said, let's bite the bullet. Let's make this move now. And it's precarious. Well, I'm sure we'll talk about that more, but because this is not an easy lift at all. Yeah. So for them to take that operational risk to make this move now tells you a lot about the type of benefits that they think they're going to get from making the move now as opposed to later. And it does set them up for 2027 in a really strong position. So
Let's speak to what you just brought up, Requinor, in terms of, you said this is effectively not going to be easy. What are some of the risks associated with this for those of us like me who are not engineers or not project development guys? Again, I look at they at the same time they also lowered, they went to the guided to the lower end of the revenue target, right? And
Mhm.
so is that a result of or because of them making the decision to move line one and the manpower it's going to take, or are they seeing enough improvement on line two and then the testing on line one that that's why they're factoring in any possible delays, and that's why they guided to the low end? I mean, what are some of the challenges, or and how serious are the challenges? Because what I like to do is, I like to look at what a company has told investors and then sort of run it through my internal probability filter, right? Like, how
Mhm.
probable is this, or what can we expect? Because I think we can get in this process of listening to calls and saying, expecting everything to go perfectly, and I don't expect things to ever go perfectly. So, what are, if you have any, some legitimate speed bumps that they have to overcome for this move of line one beyond the geography of it, right, and the physical moving? You had mentioned to me, Requinar, because you're familiar with that area, the labor force, in terms of hiring people. But from both of you, both from the engineering side, the project development side, what are some things that could go wrong, and how serious are the threats, or serious are the chances that something will go wrong, or is it, it's hard to tell until it actually goes wrong?
Let me talk about revenue first, and then Lotto and I can sort of hit the tennis ball back and forth. So, to me, the risk of road bumps is extremely high. There are a ton of moving parts behind this. Just in disassembling. I mean, if you can't disassemble a bed frame for crying out loud in your house without something going wrong. They're going to take down an operation that's spread across 3 floors, and I know those buildings because I've redeveloped them before. That is that even on to move a straight line to a straight line is going to have a lot of challenges. Um, so the notion that they're not going to hit bumps along the way is practically zero.
Okay.
So the entirety of the risk, and this is why I didn't think that they would make this announcement until they had another line in place. What's the entirety of the risk? It's all has to do with revenue. So because they've got a credibility problem, especially with hitting their numbers, right? So that's another indicator of what they see the benefit of this being, because this is one hell of a risk. So I am looking entirely at the $300 million mark, and they're at 125 right now. So they
Hmm.
need to do this move with about a maybe a 2 to 4 week disruption. And I'm, again, that's sort of spitballing based upon what we know right now. But you're going to lose 2 to 4 weeks if things go reasonably well. And then you're going to have to do the balance of your 175 million in those 2 quarters. So this thing's got to be this is there is a ton of risk in the short term, and that's a theme that we'll come back to. There's a very high short term risk for performance, so high short term expense for potentially extremely significant long term benefit.
Based on and pre Mahaz, because Mahaz hasn't even been there a year. Based on Mahaz, or based on previous experience and results, I would expect them to actually miss numbers again for this year.
That's a reasonable expectation. I do too.
Yeah.
Yeah,
If they get
I
any
do too.
bumps at all, if they get any bumps at all, there's no way they hit 175. If things go swimmingly, they might eke over it, but the only way they eke over it is if they got to disassemble the only line that's actually producing, move it, reestablish it. So what's the ramp time of reestablishing a line that you already had functioning? It's got to be similar to standing up another line, right?
3 months, 90 days. Yes.
3 months, 90 days. Let's give them the benefit of some doubt and say they managed to pull it off in 60 days. Now, the one benefit that they do have, and this is something I'll give, if my brother listens to this, I'll give him credit for it, but because he has some background in doing this stuff, he made a very salient point in that they have an entirely established labor force in Turtle Creek. And they don't have that established in Thornhill yet. They're running a skeleton crew, according to their own words. So if they can leverage existing people into the new facility and do some staff retention, throw some extra money at them because that's not an easy commute. They could ramp up their labor force pretty quickly to run both of those lines at full capacity. But I mean, do you see how quickly we get to a point where there's a lot of potholes here?
Well,
I
and
agree.
I think that the only way to and we'll come to the stock price, but I think the only way that they would overcome the negativity is announcement of line 3, DOE money, their reimbursement, announcement of additional take up by Frontier Power USA. Yes, which Frontier Power can't announce that yet because they don't have 2 full functioning lines yet. Yes. And so, I mean, there's the announcement of the hyperscaler deal in Virginia. I think that was what, 75 megawatts. There remains to be. I was telling Requinar that, uh, you know, when I always think about worst case, and I sit there and I'm like, oh, I'm just waiting for the news announcement where Frontier Power teams up with another battery company. Now that anything is possible. That is highly improbable, as Requinar reassured me. But
Yeah.
I think if we're a shareholder, I think we have to be realistic about the fact, based on what you say, and I want to hear what you're saying. Your comments, Lotto, but that there's going to be that the probability is there's going to be hiccups. The probability is there's going to be delays. And even if there aren't delays and it runs perfectly, it's still going to be difficult with the downtime in order for them to hit their numbers this year. Lotto, what would your comments be about this?
Well, I'm fully with what Reconar just said. Like moving a co-production line, it 100% sure they will have hiccups. And well, when it comes to revenue and especially to qualified personnel, um, that's not an easy task to solve. It's not McDonald's where you make burgers, where you flip burgers. This is
Mm.
this is not it. I don't know how easy it is now to move material in Thornhill. It's obviously when I quote Recono and Joe in the call, they of course made a lot of progress with the material handling because of the straight line and one floor out, out layer of the line. But moving that production line from one place to another, 100% probability we have hiccups. 100% sure. So what it makes to the revenue, what it does to the revenue, that's yet to see. But I go with what you guys say. They will not get their numbers done. They will turn it down again, like 200, 250 million. I don't know, but something like this. But it's
Yeah,
highly improbable.
I'm sorry. That makes me wonder why they didn't just lower their guidance now and just get
Oh,
it
they would
over.
have gotten creamed.
Well, they've already been
Yeah.
creamed.
Yeah.
you know,
I think
because
I think
what I hate to see is the stock, puts in this tradable bottom, which it appears to be doing, and it elevates with some good announcements, right? And then they have a delay, and the stock gets smacked again. I'd much rather hear, and this entirely goes to again lack of leadership, where even without admitting it, just mentioning it, say, look, this is going to be a difficult process, so we need to be realistic about the expectations. We can't there is a probability or possibility that this will take longer than we think, but this is what our target is. See, that's the type of communication I'm used to from the best CEOs. And then investors aren't surprised to the downside. they have a history of saying all these glowingly potential, potential, potential. Now, they have been starting to deliver on that too, but they're still on very shaky ground. As I say, their ship, the good ship stink is slowly turning. They built this up where, oh yeah, we went to our, lower end of the guidance. And I think they could have done a better job by really tempering investors' expectations through the end of the year. Because what you say, investors are going to hold you to it. So if they come in light again, it's just going to continue this constant close, but still you didn't achieve your goal. I mean, what are your thoughts on that?
I think that the whole announcement of the move smacks a bit of the whole rights offering. Because
Oh,
let's briefly replay the rights offering. We're
okay.
gonna in May, we're gonna do a rights offering, but we're not sure of the terms yet. Then they a few weeks later they give you a little bit of the terms, but we don't have it all finalized yet. Then then they do a few weeks later, you get some more detail. It was a 6 to 8 week process. So
Mhm.
how does that pertain to what we're saying today? Okay, we've made the decision that we're going to move line one to Thornhill, but we don't have a timeline for it yet. But we'll give you a report. This is all in the call. You can look at the transcript. I got it all right in front of me. And they say we don't know the timing, and we'll give you updates. They actually use that language. I don't like that. I am happy on. So it's double edged sword. I'm happy on one hand that they made a tough decision, and this definitely was a tough decision because I'm sure they're all looking at each other going, "Holy crap! If we don't execute this, there is no freaking way we're meeting the low end. And how many times have we missed already? So how
Mhm.
can we minimize that risk?" Okay, so they made a tough decision. Let's give them credit for that. But this half measure or partial picture of how are we going to do that, the absence of that information is concerning.
Lotto, you have any additional comments?
No, I agree fully with Recro.
Let's talk about some of the specific details that you were from the earnings call. I always like to call it the good, the bad, and the ugly. So let's list a couple of the good things you heard from the call.
Well, I look at again with my manufacturing hat on that they are already like have a 10% lower cycle time on the cell production on line two. Well, I didn't expect that so early, so that was impressive.
Mhm.
That they are running it only on one skeleton shift right now. I didn't expect that either, so that's a negative for me. I thought they just ramp it up right away to 3 shifts, but obviously they didn't. Maybe it's because of the lack of the qualified personnel, like the employees. You need the qualified people, and I have no idea how the situation is in the new area. How quickly can you get these people to get hired, right?
Well, it's
And
Pittsburgh. So the problem with that, Lotto, is you're already dealing with the lower intelligence general population in Pittsburgh.
w- okay, well,
Yeah, but they're
Being
all
from
out
well,
of
Philadelphia, I can tell you right now that, we're scraping the bottom of the barrel here. I'm just kidding. Go ahead,
they're
Lotto.
they're all
no,
out at
no.
St. Vincent watching the Stillers training camp.
No, and look, and even if you have hired all the people you need, it takes at least 4 weeks to train them in their stations,
Hmm,
whatever they have to do. They it's not burger flipping where you have like a manual, which is kind of easy.
okay.
So I see a big risk in having qualified people there.
So,
Seriously,
so the good would be that, from your standpoint, it was the increase in efficiency off of line two. Yes.
absolutely.
Okay. All right. Did you hear anything ugly? I mean, where you just shook your head and go, that's not true."
From a manufacturing standpoint, no. From a financial standpoint, well, that's not my expertise. So, I mean, Reconoc might say something to that.
How about you, Requinar? What were some, you've named a couple of the good things coming out of that call, but, the good, the bad, and the ugly, if there were any of those data points.
Well, let's go backwards so we can end on a higher note. Ugly, the absence of details of the move, as I just talked about. I would have liked to have had even a little bit more detail on how they expect to pull that off to minimize disruption. There was a little bit of confusion around what's nameplate for these lines. You know, we've
Mm.
been told up to this point that, but that nameplate production is 2 gigawatt hours per line. There's a little bit of confusion with references to 1.5 gigawatts by Joe on at least a couple occasions during the call, yet they're saying they reached nameplate. So, okay, you're at a 1.5 gigawatt hour run rate and then at a point later on in the call, you're saying, you said on two different occasions, but we've reached nameplate. Well, which is it? Is it nameplate 2 gigawatt hours per line? Or is it 1.5? Or is it something in the middle? Like under the conditions of Turtle Creek, realistic nameplate is 1.5. Okay, and I could accept that, and that dovetails into maybe into why they're making the move. So there was that. The last ugly thing is I think they tap danced all over the place with regard to what their true cash burn is. You know, we've gone back and forth talking about, well, what the hell is the actual cash burn rate? They made some allusions to, okay, well, the cash burn, the operational, because that was their language, the operational cash burn rate is now closely approximating adjusted EBITDA. Okay, but that doesn't jibe with with some of your other financial statements. So I think the best that we can discern at this point is that they're somewhere between low 40s and 70 cash burn rate. So they're still okay, and I think that was really a driver. You bring this full circle. I think that's a driver behind why they're making this move now to get both of those lines churning, and then you'll see a lot of cost reduction as they. That was one of their slides. In fact, that was a good slide. I did like that one. So
Let me ask you this question. If you were to remove giving them the benefit of the doubt, right? And look at it purely from a completely objective point of view, it scores less, that call. Okay. For
mhm.
many of the reasons you've mentioned, if you didn't give them, if you weren't giving them the benefit of the doubt, which is what investors do when a company lays out operational or any guidance whatsoever. Okay. But I am getting a little bit concerned with, I hope we're not entering into the word salad era where there were more specifics, which I was happy about. But as you have pointed out, Requinar, and you dive down in the details, they're still playing a little bit of fun with words. Now, I think what's going on partly is purely from an operational standpoint. I was reading an article this week that there are so many projects that are caught in this interconnect purgatory. Okay. Arthur, I forget where I was reading this article, and I think they probably look at this and why maybe there's not a rush to announce line 3, because even if they were to announce it, they still have to rely upon the utilities who don't want to do interconnect agreements because it takes revenues out of their pocket. And that seems to be a major bottleneck for any of these projects, whether we're talking about battery, we're talking about companies building their own power generation, that it's the utilities themselves also that are delaying some of these projects. But and that's my thinking, like, well, maybe they think that from a just operational standpoint, they've got the time. Let's talk about what's the good. What are some of the good things that you heard? Again, without giving them the benefit of the doubt.
Okay, I mean, there's a lot of good here. I know we've sort of been somewhat focused on some of the negative aspects of the call, but there's a lot of good here. Starting with it, they made a tough decision at a tough period in their history. So I give them a lot of credit for that because that couldn't have been an easy decision.
But
Um,
why is that a tough decision?
because it makes it so much hard. They would have coasted. They would have coasted and made those numbers. Their revenue numbers would have been a layup. And now they just threw that into doubt whether
Okay.
they will. Now I
And so
still
why
think
did they do that? What's the motivation to do that then?
because the upside is tremendous.
Okay.
They solve a lot of problems by making this move and making this move now. They
I agree.
they're going to take one step back to take about 3 or 4 steps forward because now that facility, which is, I mean, inefficient doesn't even begin to describe that. It's inefficient in every way. It's inefficient from a production standpoint, from a labor standpoint, from a logistics standpoint, I'm talking about getting shipments in and out of Turtle Creek,
Mhm.
which is a nightmare. In Thornhill is the polar opposite of that situation. So they made it. They're going to take a risk that they're not going to hit their numbers, and they could hit them. It's just you have to have a lot of stuff go right for them to hit them. But so I give them props. I don't think this company a year ago would have made a tough call like this.
Mm. Mm.
So that's to me, that's a really good aspect. I was very happy, and I know Lotto will talk about this. I was happy with their specs, and Lotto can get into details on that one. The battery specs, I think that issue's off the table now. I think the fact that they cited how exceptionally well the numbers are on line 2 at this very early stage that prompted them to move line 1 ahead of schedule. I think that's extremely encouraging, and I think the FPUSA thing is still, they got into more detail this last call, but I think that's gonna mitigate a ton of that risk that you're talking about with the interconnectivity agreements too. So there's a lot of good here. I don't want people to take away that, it's all sour because it's not.
Mhm.
But I just want people to expect that I'm expecting them to miss
Mhm.
their guidance. But other than that, this is the right call. 2027 is going to be in a lot better situation because they made this tough call.
Votto, what do you have to
Yeah, I
add?
totally agree. Like I said earlier, 2027 will be their year. Um, when it comes to moving the line 1, you have to imagine when you have 3 shifts running on one line and you just want to have another line running at 3 shifts, you need double the people, and you need double the people qualified and knowing what they are doing. So it's a bit like if you have one line running and then you ramp up another line, then the existing people can train the new people if you're able to hire them in time. What I see here now is the bottleneck of employees, of qualified employees, not so much the engineering, because I think Agro and all the suppliers and the lessons learned and building up the line to already in 90 days and getting it running with all the material flow, with all the positive material flow, which leads them to this decision right now to even move line 1. That's very, very positive. But the bottleneck here is, in my opinion, the qualified people. When you have 3 shifts, the shift change when the personal change every day. You need to have a briefing and all that kind of stuff. That needs time to get into flow. I see, like I said, like the technology works. They are happy with line 2. They are able to upgrade line 1 to line 2 capacity. So that's all very, very positive. And what Reckoner pointed out, that lead them to that decision to do it right now and not in 27 or 28, it's a very positive sign because they are very happy with what they see in Thornhill. And not just the line, but as you said, the area as well as moving the material in and out. Having like hundreds of trucks coming in and out every day is a logistics nightmare.
Is moving harder than putting up a new line? Let me ask you that way.
A little bit, because it's not, well, you have to pack it up and then you have to ship it and then you have to rebuild it. It's basically the same as when when they have it installed in the Acro facility, get the final acceptance testing. It's basically the same. The moving part is, in my opinion, with Agro, where they will probably do it together with Agro, so it's not a big deal. The upgrading and getting it done and getting it running again, that's a little bit of a challenge. But it's like I said, the engineering, I don't see it that big of a deal because they already did it. They already had the final acceptance at the Acro facility, and then they pack it up and then they reinstall it in Thornhill. So they already have it. That's not a big deal.
Is it incorrect for me to look at it that really they're also saying at the same time they're going to move it and get it up and running, but they're also going to have an increase by 33% in the efficiency of line 1?
Yeah, that's how I
How
understood it.
realistic is that?
Very, in my
Extremely.
opinion.
Yeah.
Extremely. From an engineering perspective, extremely. I did these upgrades myself. It's very, very extremely efficient when
Yeah,
you
I'll
do
go.
So
that.
is
I'll
there,
go a step. I'll go a step further. Okay, so nameplate for a basic line was 2 gigawatt hours. You know, this little bit of confusion notwithstanding. Let's presume that that's correct, and I think it is. Okay, they're already seeing on a brand new line with a skeleton crew, they're already seeing cycle times reduced from 10 to 9 seconds. I think that's just the beginning. So now you could end up, and I'm not saying they're going to, but you could end up, what if you ended up with 2 lines at 3 gigawatt hours each because of the efficiencies that they're going to squeeze out of this thing? They have 0% chance of doing that with the current line 1 in Turtle Creek. None.
Yeah, exactly.
So are you telling me that the physical location of line one has been what the holdback is in terms of increasing its production and its efficiency?
Oh, it's a nightmare.
Okay.
Absolutely. So they're
Okay.
having to, these are according to their own words, they're having to use forklifts and other things to move material from one department to the next. Not only that, but they're having to hire, they referenced it at least once or twice in this last call, their use of temporary labor to do some of this stuff. And if you've ever used temporary labor, and I have, it's at least 50% more expensive than having your own employees.
Hmm. Okay.
So they're getting smacked over the head with temporary labor charges, gross inefficiencies by moving between departments. It is about the worst possible setup that they could have possibly had. And I'll take Joe at his word this time that, you know, that's all they could afford, although I'm not quite sure that's true, but I'll take him at his word for it. It is inexpensive space.
How is the labor market in terms of candidates? Is it a target-rich environment, or are we going to have difficulty in hiring in that area?
Turtle Creek is definitely more suited towards your blue collar line worker labor pool.
Hmm.
So I would expect that they'll have to pay more. If it were me, and I, again, this is operating with only partial information, I would probably pay my trained labor pool more to make the commute and try to retain them than try to go recruit a brand new. I mean, not that you would stop. I mean, you never stop hiring, so you just keep, you know, you keep trying to hire. The fact that they're going to automate to the degree that they are quicker should suggest that they'll need less labor here coming up. So that's probably part of their equation too. But it's okay. I mean, it's definitely a more affluent area where they are up in Thornhill, so it might be a little bit tougher, but you know, it's far from impossible.
Well, let me ask you this now, because I want to finish with two questions. The final two questions I think are, what do you expect out of the stock post earnings remaining of the year? And then did their earnings make you more or less bullish, and why? But let me ask you this question. I think one of the ancillary events that happened was TTI's earning announcement. What do you think could be coming from an announcement standpoint over through the end of the year? I think we will get the DOE reimbursement. We're going to get NYSERDA, but NYSERDA is a double-edged sword because if they don't get a significant contract out of it, then certainly the market's going to look at that and say, well, why didn't you? I think we're going to get NYSERDA, something about the tax rebates. I also, maybe it's hopeful. I'm being too hopeful. I think by the end of the year, we should get an announcement on line three. I do wonder if additional announcements by Frontier Power of additional uptake are going to be lost or ignored until EOSE can prove that they can meet that gigawatt demand. But what am I missing? Any other possible announcements you could see through the end of the year?
Well, when it comes to FPUSA, as far as I'm concerned, they have like 1.8 gigawatts in reserve, well, in orders given
Mhm.
to EOS. So that's one line for 1 year. They have about 5 gigawatt hours in potential orders coming. So let's say they get half of it. That would be another line in production for 1 year. That would bring us in line with TTI's earnings call, because TTI said, well, our bromine tower will be ready for operation in 2028. So, and the TTI upgrade of their facility, they do it because now they can buy the bromine from another supplier, but they have like to pay a shit ton of money for it. So for them to making their own bromine in their own tower is just bringing their costs down in order to profit from the volume they get from EOS in 2028. That's how I read the TTI call, to go full circle here to understand how they are interconnected.
What any other announcements you see, or let's say operational benchmarks? They seem to be pretty quiet from earnings to earnings in terms of operational updates. I'd like to see more, but I do understand there's only only so much they can say. Because, and the reason I'm asking is leading me to the final two questions, which are first of all, I'm going to comment on what I think the positive post earnings stock price movement, but also you know through the end of the year, I'm being forced to push out my timeline to 2027, and not very good for my 2027 leaps, but that's just the way the cookie crumbles.
Me
But
too.
anything else, Lotto, that you see that this could be coming, or I mean, UK?
I don't know what's going on in UK. I now read about Puerto Rico and Germany. Europe is definitely coming, but as I know Europe, they will be last because of how the legislation and the lawmaking process is here. That I don't expect anything so quickly, actually.
Okay, okay. What about you,
UK,
Repinar?
yeah, I know. Just to address the UK issue, from what I understand, UK did their initial quote unquote awards, and EOS only got one small project, but now they are in the appeal phase where projects get a chance to say, "Hey, wait a minute, we don't necessarily agree with your conclusion, and here's why." So the UK is not off the table yet at all, and of course they had the two projects that were over there. They said, "Well, we're moving forward with EOS anyway," so that was nice to see. But I think that we'll see a pretty regular stream of announcements from FPUSA at this point.
Hmm.
Again, that's going to mitigate the whole timing issue and the interconnectivity, and a lot of the delay. And they referred to this a couple times in the call. A lot of the delay on these projects was they'd get to the 1 yard line and they couldn't get the deal financed. So
Hmm.
that takes that risk entirely off the table. That's exactly why Bimergen is starting to feed projects to FPUSA because they can't get in the end zone on financing. So I think we're going to start to get some rhythm with deals coming through that feeder pipeline. I mean, they just announced in on this call about the Stella first order from Stella. So currently we got Bimergen and Stella as feeders. I wouldn't be surprised to see another company or two over the coming months announced as another feeder to FPUSA. So that would be
Hmm.
good. We got M&8 hanging out there as with it was a joint development agreement, if I'm not mistaken. Talon Energy, Puerto Rico. And so there's a good bit. And then of course, hanging around in the background is how fast do they start to get deals for military bases, and not just for the bases themselves. I don't know if you guys read this, but apparently the federal government is exploring the use of federal installations, military and otherwise, I guess, for data centers
Hmm.
because they're not going to run into the NIMBY crowd. It's
Right.
basically we're going to do it, and that's the end of that. So there's a lot of good out hanging out there, and it seems like they're picking up some momentum now.
Well, that segues nicely into I'm encouraged by the stock price movement. Usually you see the drop, pre-market opening on the news release. We saw that. But then you usually see an additional drop after the CEO talks, and we did not see that. And then usually we get a couple more days of a drop before it finally bottoms out. We saw, I mean, the stock reacted very nicely. Now, I attribute some of that to the Russell because it did trade in tandem with the Russell on Thursday. I was encouraged by the stock price movement. I don't know why it reacted that way because I was expecting additional drawdown to it and a two handle as I'd been saying. But it appears to me that there's three ways, or there's three very distinct lines for the stock price to move. Number one is operational efficiency, which we've all rated as high risk in terms of moving that line one. Number two is deal order flow, announcement of deals. I think we've been seeing deal order flow, and I think the market is rightfully focused upon execution. So show me, and I believe it. And then I think the third thing is if the stock price is able to, in a weird way, if the stock price is able to get it back above $8 to $10 here by November, I think we could see the stock price get unbalanced to the top side again. The stock has a history of moving from July-ish to let's say the end of November. That's been its strongest period historically, and I don't know if now we've had a couple catalysts each year. One of them was the DOE loan closing, and I think they were also being given much more of a benefit of the doubt in the previous years, and now it is you have to show us as investors. I don't think I was encouraged by the stock price movement. I think it's going to be a very difficult hill to climb because I don't know what the investment community's reaction is going to be to additional possible deals being announced or closed. I think, if they were to get a large NSERDA award, I think that would really help propel the stock higher. But I'm all about, as you guys know, I'm all about the rhythm and the cadence of announcements. That if they can hit their rhythm again, the cadence, it puts a tremendous amount of pressure on the algos. Whenever you release good news and you continue to release good news, that's been missing. Some of that, while they've had some good announcement from FPUSA, the market is squarely focused on execution and now this new operational risk that they've inserted that could pay off later. But investors are looking at it from a what can you do for me today standpoint. What are your thoughts in terms of looking through the stock price performance post earnings and the remainder of the year?
Well, yeah, as you said, I would love to see them go up with the seasonality when we have like more substantial news announcement and not these wishy-washy, yeah, potential things. So we need, and I think a lot of people are talking about, oh, we need sales, we need orders. I think FPUSA is pretty much doing that for them.
Mm,
They cherry pick the projects. They don't really need well, in my opinion, they don't really need a sales team because they get all the projects now through that financing vehicle which FPUSA is providing to them. So the bankability is a big deal, right? You can get the technology right, you can get the interconnection right, you can get the customer right, the data center, everything, or whatever it is, right? And then the performance insurance, it's not to be underestimated how important that is, that someone insures your performance
for 15
for
years, right?
for 15 years. And if I just inject that in here, when they were talking about the return trip efficiency in that one slide, I was impressed by these numbers, because having a return trip efficiency on a battery which charges multiple times a day in these high 70 to 80% numbers, that's impressive. That is really impressive. And that's what the performance insurer, whether it's Lloyd's London or Ariel Green, this is what they look at. Can they bring the technical performance over time for a long time? And when they say, okay, they can with the changes of Dawn OS and the single cell monitoring, and
Mm,
they agree on the technology, on the solution, on the technology solution, and they say, okay, with this we can do it, compared to the old version of string monitoring, right?
mhm.
Then this is a big deal from the technology, right? So and this is what the customer wants to see. They need return on investment, and that is guaranteed by the technology, which is insured by Area Green and Lloyd's of London. So this is a big deal for me.
And Lloyd's of London just isn't going to take your word for it. They're going to
No.
underwrite the heck
Right.
out of that. So
They
they
ha
didn't say, "Oh, that sounds good. Okay, we're going to
Well,
put
I
you
do
we
in
have
the
believe
to
you.
source of revenue because you're a nice fella."
Repinar, what are you thinking in terms of stock price movement post earnings and then for remainder of the year?
Again, it's a bifurcation of short term, long term.
Hmm.
Short term, I have real concerns about the stock price. Now, could they mitigate that with announcing a steady stream of orders? Every 2 to 4 weeks or two to 6 weeks, build up
Hmm.
their stock price a bit, because I think the algos are going to hit when, if or when, what seems likely to happen is that they're not going to hit their guidance. You know, and there's a big cloud right now. Okay, well, what would be sufficient? What would be a sufficient number to hit for Q3 to not have a sell-off? Well, we don't know anymore now, do we? All
Mm-mm.
we know is that we're between 300 and 350. Well, okay, we know they're not going to be on the same pace that they were. So how do we readjust? What's a good number now that we say that we or the algos are going to say, hey, you know what? They're on target now. As of this minute, that is an impossible thing to state with any certainty. Because
Well, we would
if
expect the third quarter numbers to come in light too. I
That's what I'm
would.
saying. That's exactly what I mean by that.
Yeah.
Because they're, according again to Joe's own words, I think it was the second paragraph. He said, you know, we second half. I'm going to paraphrase. Actually, I don't even need to paraphrase. I don't think. But he said, you know, second half's got to be greater than first half, and fourth quarter has to be greater than third quarter. Well, thank you for that, Archimedes. I couldn't have figured that out on my own. You, you know, but the point is, what's the number? If they throw up a 50 spot, is that good? Is that bad? Do they have to hit the same as before? 68? Is that okay?
Mhm.
You know, because everything's now readjusted to the path to 300. And unless we have an idea of what Q4, I mean, hey, if you told me right now that Q4 they're going to have both of those lines up and humming, I'd feel
Mhm.
really good about them still hitting their guidance. The problem is that's a gigantic bogey right now. There's no way to handicap it right this minute.
You bring up a great point, Repinar. You know, Joe's making that comment. It's like I sit there and listen. I'm like, look, we're not fucking idiots here. You can give us the specifics, ranges, right?
And it's
Uh,
and it smacks of the good old days, doesn't it? All we
yeah,
need is a double and a double. And I'm like, oh
yeah,
my gosh, here we go, double and a double again. You know, we saw how
yeah.
that played out. But you know, could they do it? They could do it, but it all comes down to the move. And that's why, you know, guidance at this point, yeah, we have this undefined, well, it is defined, but we have this number that's hanging out there, 300. You know, 300 to me would be sufficient. I think 350 is a pipe dream. I'd be happy at 300, and that would fall into the range of your guidance. But we still don't know how we're going to get there as of today.
Yeah, but if
No
they
idea.
have if the move is going to take 3 to 4 weeks, okay, and that's
Yep,
if it goes perfectly, and
that's
then you
right.
have the ramp up time, right, to prove out the line, right, that before you ramp the operational level up. Realistically speaking, we could be talking, 60 days would be fast. So if we
Hmm.
correct me if I'm wrong, Lotto, we could be losing a quarter from line one. So I'm looking at this going, well, what they could be doing is setting up for a excuse for not meeting the numbers. But again, that goes to the CEO of, well, just fucking tell us that. Take your medicine, do it now with the stock price at lows. What are you worried about? It's already gotten pounded down. There's not the people that are holding this stock now, okay, are those people that truly believe and are believe in the technology and are giving you benefit of the doubt in terms of execution. Because he seems to think that he still has this reservoir of goodwill. He has no goodwill. The reason why I came in with a positive attitude about that call was more because of Mahaz, quite frankly. My ears blew when I hear Joe because of that mushmouth type of talking. And the last company I referred to mushmouth, in word salad was freaking Anavex, right?
Yeah.
Um, Now
So
there's a
true.
major difference between the two. For the biggest one is I've actually seen a working product out of EOSE, where I still have yet to see a working model product out of Anavex. But I think they're going to miss, and I think they're going to miss badly their annual revenue target. And they're thinking they can bridge the difference by pointing to 2027, which is the same thing I said last year. Okay, that they would probably miss. I said this last year, they did miss, and they were going to try to get investors and the investment community focused on the future. Well, that ship has sailed. They're not going to get away with doing that again. And if they don't start reporting some very specific numbers in terms of what you're saying, how are you going to get there? Right? Not we need to do a better job this quarter than we did last quarter, and then we need to do a better job in the fourth quarter than we did. Fucking A, no kidding. Honestly, I'm sitting there going, well, how are they going to? They got to do 125. What do they have to do for the remainder of the year? 170, 175?
Yeah, 175 puts them there.
Yeah,
They're just a hair over that. I think they're 126. So
yeah.
yeah,
So no
just round.
fucking way are they going to do that.
And here's the irony of everything that we're talking about. before it was excuses. I think this is a bona fide reason for them doing what they're doing, and I really do think that this sets them up for 2027.
Mhm.
Whereas before you just go, oh, there's always 2026, as you wring your hands.
Mhm.
So this time I really think it's a legitimate reason. But man, the short term pain. What if they so they're going to take their only revenue producing line, his words, here's their quote: line one will be down during the move. Okay, that's Joe, like paragraph two. So
Mhm.
you're taking your only revenue generator because the other line's only operating at 1%. 1%.
Mhm.
You're going to take your only revenue generator, you're going to shut it down while you move it. I wouldn't be surprised to see a 30 million quarter number. And what happens then?
Yeah, and that's the number I was looking. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
So then
Less than this last quarter.
you need 145 million to make up for it.
Yeah, and the
What they
chance
would
of that happening is the same chance of that Penn State winning the national championship. So I mean, it's not going to fucking happen. So the only sliver of hope, good that I pull out of it. Look, short term for me is through the end of the year. Okay,
Me
I'll put a
too.
swing trade on based on price levels. I have adjusted my price level down where I will put a swing trade, but my swing trades are very simple. Either they make money in 3 days or we're fucking gone out of them, right? So I think that bears have a reasonable case to this stock sideways to down through the end of the year, and they're going to miss. And I think investors, if I was an advisor, I'd be telling my clients, you got to be prepared that they are going to miss. So what does that do for me? It delays any thought for me of buying warrants. Why the hell would I do that right now? Okay, I don't need to, because I think the stock price is going lower, and I think the warrants will go lower through the end of the year. I think
Yeah.
if they hadn't pulled last year's, hey, forget about the fourth quarter and the fact that we missed, and we reassured you we wouldn't, and look to the future. Well, they've already played that card. They're not going to get to play that card again.
And that's the
So,
unfortunate aspect of this, is that they're finally doing something that has legitimacy to it. And now that it's like they cried wolf too many times. And now they're
mhm,
going to say this is for 2027. And guess what? I believe that.
mhm.
I believe that and I agree with that. And I do think this sets them up for a hockey stick for 2027. But they've burned so much so much of their credibility getting to this point that nobody's going to believe it. But that'll be a
Well, the
good
only
buying
good thing that could
opportunity.
come out of them, if they do a massive miss, the only good thing could come out of is maybe my dream will be realized and Joe will be replaced. At that point, he would need to be replaced. You cannot have 8 straight quarters of missing. You cannot have that. And I don't care if you miss by a million or you miss by 20 million. It's a miss is a miss, especially if in the previous quarter you're out there reassuring investors that you're not going to miss, right? They've already guided down. I expect another guide down in the third quarter, by the way. So I think that 300 million number is going to come down, and it could come as low as, shockingly, 250 million.
I think
Shockingly,
that's reasonable.
maybe that'll be enough for Cerberus to finally say, you know what, you're fucking gone. Because I'm not, as much as I bitch about his inability to be a world class or a top level CEO, even at this point, I'm like, well, my attitude has been, well, my hope is that the rest of the C suite will be able to overcome whatever garbage he's spitting out. And in order for that to happen, I need to see more specific numbers from them. So over for me for the rest of the year, my final question was going to be: did earnings make you more or less bullish, and why? Look, it made me more bullish, but it made me more bullish beyond 2026. I'm not bullish through the end of this year for the remaining months of this year. Yes, they could
100%.
pull. Yeah, they could pull a rabbit out of the hat. Yes, the market could get absolutely lit on fire, and small caps, a rotation into batteries. I mean, there's so many what ifs. But if I just merely look at the ingredients on the stove right now, I'm like, they're going to reduce the numbers again in the third quarter. They're going to come out and say, well, we had a little bit of delay. We're working hard and we think we got it all up and running. But, as we said in the second quarter conference call, we stated that, we were going to take the line down. It took an extra week and a half, and that's what I'm expecting to happen in the third quarter. I think that the realistic number for them is actually 250 million. Okay. And that's if 90% of it goes well from my, grade school understanding of the operational and engineering challenges that they face to move it. I've adjusted my price target down multiple times. I still believe that there is the possibility for the stock to trade between 10 and 12 bucks. Okay. Last quarter was 12 to 15. Okay. 10 and 12 bucks, but it's going to have to be on the back of an overall market move higher, small caps moving higher, lower interest rate environment, all of those things. Now, here's the other thing. The expectation is so low right now that any good news where they are faster, more effective, more efficient on moving the line could propel the stock higher very quickly. Look, this stock wants to move. I mean, this is a stock. What do we move on Thursday or Friday? 9%. This thing can move. So it's not. There is an investment community. It's a great stock to trade, but in order to get to that curve of the handle stick and into the handle of the hockey stick, I mean, they've got to show operational execution and excellence. And up until this point, they haven't. They're starting to, I will give you that, but it made me more bullish longer term. I think for me, and I'll do a podcast on it by comparing warrants to leaps, but I have no, there's no rush is what I'm saying. Where do you guys think?
Well, for me, yes, long term again, 2027, 2028. If they execute, if line one is successfully moved and upgraded, I'm not sure if they can pull out another financial engineering rabbit as they did the other quarter, right? Where they kind of calculated some numbers back and forth in order to book in revenue. What I also don't know is how many of the cubes of the batteries they have in stock, which are now on their property and not booked in as revenue. Because what we have to distinguish here is production output does not equal revenue. Revenue is booked when the customer made the final acceptance and the thing at the customer side is in operation. So nobody is talking about this. So this is a big wild card for me. So I would be carefully bullish for this year, but definitely more bullish for 27 and especially 28.
What about you, Mr. Repreneur?
Yeah, I am, for the reasons that we said, I'm short-term bearish. I think that the best case scenario is that, you have a slight trend upward, but then I think that Q3's call is going to disappoint the algos, let's say, and it's going to get pushed down. So hopefully the share price will trend upwards for a little while here before people get that shock. So you have more. I hate to put it that way. I really do. I hate
the diaper to shit in.
Yeah, that's right. Maybe you got the premium Pampers for that call. It's got some lotion in it and stuff, so you don't chafe as much. But that's going to be a diaper load, I think, in Q3. It's just a matter of how bad. But I am much more with one caveat. I am much more bullish about the company longer term, meaning end of 2026. I think there's finally set up, and a lot of the big bogeys that were out there are being resolved. Performance and production and cost out finally get it. We finally have a reasonable path to get there, a path to profitability. I get all that. The one caveat that I alluded to is they got to get this done quick enough so that cash burn doesn't require an additional capital raise.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So if they can, that's why, it can't be overstated how important this move is right now.
Well, I think that's a great place to stop for today. Once again, Mr. Requinar, Mr. Lotto von Bismarck, thank you so much for taking out of your day this Saturday. And I think we're pretty much in agreement that the next couple months could be challenging, but hopefully if they can navigate this and they'll get to a point where brighter days are ahead, but I think we're going to have to go through maybe a little bit more pain first, but who knows? It'd be nice to be surprised at the upside. So, hey, thanks for listening and taking time out of your Saturday, listeners. And as always, if you have any stocks that you want us to consider, if you have any questions, certainly if you want to join my free Discord, please send me a message at theboss@mrnotadvice.com. And I will be back next weekend with a weekend update, as well as you can find my end of the day updates on YouTube on the same channel. So have a great weekend, everyone.
Turned away from it all like a blind man. Sat on the fence, but it don't work. Keep coming up with love, but it's so slashed and torn. Why?